You ever notice something strange about yourself? Something quiet? Something that doesn't make a sound when it happens? Your frequency doesn't drop when life gets worse. No, it drops the moment you stop noticing you. Let that sink in. Because the real fall, the one that actually shifts your reality, never comes from a bad day, a disappointment, or a setback. It happens in the tiny instant where your awareness drifts just a little. So little that you don't even feel it. And that's the paradox. You don't lose your alignment because life pulls you down. You lose it because you slowly disappear from yourself, not dramatically, not violently, but silently. Like a dimmer switch being turned 1 degree at a time. You think it's stress, you think it's soul fatigue. You tell yourself, I'm just not in the mood today. But deep down, something else is happening. A slide, a drift, a gentle fall back into the version of you that the world trained you to become. Not the version you consciously chose. And here's the part that should make you pause. If the frequency slip is quiet, if it happens beneath your awareness, then how many times has it already happened without you ever noticing? How many dreams did you delay? How many shifts did you almost make? Because your frequency drifted. 2%, 5%, just enough for you to forget who you were becoming. You see, the danger isn't the fall. The danger is the fall you can't feel. And if you can't feel it, if you can't even recognize the moment you drift out of yourself, how can you possibly stay aligned? That's the real question. That's the heart of the paradox. And that's exactly where this story begins. So here's the mystery, the part that doesn't quite add up when you first hear it. If you've already raised your frequency, if you've already awakened, if you've already tasted that higher version of yourself, then the one that feels clearer, lighter, sharper, why does it still slip? Why does it drift? You practice presence, you meditate, you align your breath, you tune your mind like an instrument. And for a while, everything feels right, everything feels synced, everything clicks, and then, without warning, without any obvious trigger, without anything bad happening, you're suddenly not there anymore. Your thoughts feel heavier, your reactions feel older, your energy feels like it's shrinking back into a shape you swore you outgrew. But here's the strange part. You don't remember the moment it happened. There's no dramatic scene, no emotional collapse, no cosmic fall from grace. Just a tiny shift, a microscopic wobble. So small that your conscious mind doesn't see it. And that's when the question hits you: if I know how to stabilize my frequency, if I've done it before, then what pulls me out of alignment when I'm not looking? What is this invisible force that quietly slides you back into your old identity? Without permission, without noise, without letting you notice? You can call it habit. You can call it conditioning. You can call it survival mode. But in this story, in this journey you and I are about to take, there's a deeper mechanism at play. A hidden current, a subtle gravitational pull in your energetic field, a phenomenon I call the reality drift. It's not emotional, it's not psychological, it's not even spiritual in the way most people think. It's a silent shift in the frequency you're broadcasting, while you're too distracted to catch it happening. And once you understand the logic behind this drift, the science, the neurology, the quantum behavior underneath it, you'll start to see your entire life differently. But we're not going there yet. Not just now. For the moment, I want you to sit with the question. If your frequency can drift without your awareness, then what else in your life is changing without your permission? Hold that. Leave it open. Let the curiosity stay unresolved. Because the answer is coming in the next part. To understand this drift, you need an image. Something simple, something your mind can hold the moment your awareness slips. So picture this: a small boat, light, unanchored, resting on calm water. There's no storm, no waves, nothing dramatic, just a quiet river, and a boat that doesn't realize the current beneath it is always moving. At first, the shift is barely a whisper, a few inches, a slow slide, so gentle you wouldn't notice unless you were staring at the shoreline. But give it 5 minutes, give it 1 hour, give it a full day. And that same boat, the one that thought it was right where it needed to be, has drifted so far from its center that it no longer recognizes the place it started from. That is reality drift. Not a fall, not a crash, a micro-movement happening below your awareness, pulling you back toward old habits, old emotions, old identities you thought you'd left behind. Let me give you one more image. Think of a radio. You tune it perfectly. Clear sound, sharp signal, no static. But if the dial shifts even a fraction of an inch, just half a degree, the station doesn't suddenly vanish. It fades, soft at first, then muddled, then distant, until eventually, you're listening to a version of the message that feels wrong, distorted, unfamiliar, and the whole time you didn't lose the station. You simply drifted off it without realizing your hand ever touched the dial. Your frequency works the same way. It doesn't plummet. It deviates. It slides a tiny bit off the signal you're trying to hold. So tiny you never feel the moment it begins. And by the time you notice, by the time the static gets loud enough to catch your attention, you're already broadcasting from a version of yourself you thought you'd transcended. Not because you failed, not because you're weak, but because drift is subtle, gradual, invisible to the untrained mind. This is why so many people say, "I don't know what happened. I was doing so well." They were. They just didn't anchor themselves. They didn't stabilize the signal. They didn't see the current moving beneath them. But now, you've seen the metaphor. You can feel the imagery forming inside you. A boat without an anchor. A radio one click off its true station. And once you understand these images, you're ready to understand the next part. The part where we break the biggest misconception people have about awakening, alignment, and what it really means to evolve past your old self. That's where we go next. Here's the belief almost everyone carries. Sometimes consciously, but more often quietly in the background of their mind. Once I awaken, I won't go back. Sounds empowering, right? Clean, strong, almost heroic, but it's not true. And if you hold on to that belief, if you cling to it as proof that you've made it, then the moment your frequency dips even 1 inch, you'll think something is wrong with you. You'll think you failed. You'll think you lost your progress. You'll think your growth was an illusion. But listen closely. Awakening doesn't erase your old frequency. Awakening simply adds a new one. You didn't delete the old you. You just rose above it. And anything you rise above, you can fall back into if you stop paying attention. Most people mistake this fall as a mood drop. I'm just tired. I'm unmotivated today. Maybe I'm overwhelmed. But no, that's not what's happening. You're not losing motivation. You're not losing passion. You're not losing clarity. You're drifting silently, softly. back into an identity your nervous system finds familiar. See, the old you isn't your enemy. It's your default setting. It's the version your body and brain memorized over years, sometimes decades. So when you stop being present, when you stop consciously choosing who you are becoming, your system automatically returns to what it knows. Not because you're broken, not because you're weak, but because your biology is designed to conserve energy by repeating familiar patterns. Awakening doesn't override that. Awakening simply gives you a new option, a higher channel, a clearer frequency, but a higher frequency doesn't sustain itself. It requires awareness. It requires intention. It requires presence. And presence isn't permanent. Presence is practiced. That's the paradigm shift. You don't fall because you're failing. You fall because you're human. And every human has gravity. The gravitational pull of old habits, old stories, old identities waiting to reclaim you the moment you stop noticing yourself. But here's the empowering part. Once you understand this, once you see the mechanism behind the drift, you stop blaming yourself, you stop judging yourself, you stop assuming something went wrong. Because nothing went wrong, you simply drifted. And what drifts can be steered, what drifts can be corrected, what drifts can be brought back into alignment. Gently, easily. Once you know how to see the signs, now that we've broken the old myth, you're ready for the next layer. The quantum explanation behind why the drift happens in the first place. Even when you think you've mastered your frequency, that's where we go next. To understand why your frequency slips, you have to step into the quantum layer of your reality, the part beneath your thoughts, beneath your emotions, beneath the identity you hold on to so tightly. And here's the truth that most people never hear. Every version of you has its own gravitational field. In quantum physics, we call this an attractor basin, a kind of energetic valley that pulls you toward a certain state of being unless you continuously supply the energy to rise above it. Your old frequency, the one shaped by survival, childhood patterns, past identities, old emotional signature, is one of those attractor basins. And it's deep, not because it's powerful, but because it's familiar. Now think of a quantum electron. When it jumps to a higher orbit, a higher energy state, it feels light, fast, expansive. But if it stops receiving energy, even for a moment, what happens? It doesn't stay there. It falls, instantly, effortlessly, back to its baseline orbit. Not because it's wrong, not because it's weak, simply because that's what energy does without a constant source to maintain the elevation. You work the same way. When you elevate your frequency on through presence, awareness, intention, inner work, you rise into a new orbit of consciousness. Thoughts become cleaner, perception becomes wider, reality feels softer, brighter, more aligned. But the moment you stop feeding that frequency, the moment your attention drifts, the moment life gets busy, distracting, comfortable, you fall back into the gravitational pull of your previous state, your baseline. Not because you're unspiritual, not because you're failing, but because every frequency you've ever lived in still exists in your field as a possible orbit you can return to. Your old identity has momentum. Your old emotions have signatures. Your old reactions have pathways burned into your nervous system. They are still there, waiting. Not lurking in a sinister way, but sitting like a valley waiting for raindrops to return. And what are your thoughts? Your emotions? Your behaviors? Raindrops. The moment you stop consciously elevating them, they slide downhill, back toward the attractor basin that used to define your life. This is the quantum logic behind reality drift. Energy returns to its most stable state unless you continue supplying the force that elevates it. Your new frequency is higher, but it's not stable yet, not automatic, not locked in. Not until you consistently inhabit it long enough for it to become your new gravitational center, your new baseline. And once that happens, once the higher frequency becomes your default, the drift changes direction. Instead of falling back into the old you, you begin falling forward into the version you're becoming. But we're not there yet. Before you reach that point, you need to understand the next layer, the neurological layer, where your brain quietly participates in this drift without your permission and without your awareness. That's where we go next. Now let's step inside the architecture of your mind. Not the mystical part, not the spiritual part, but the biological machine that quietly shapes your identity every minute of your life. Here's something most people never realize. Your brain is not designed to make you evolved. It's designed to make you safe. And safe, in the language of your nervous system, doesn't mean expanded, awakened, or aligned. It means familiar. Your brain loves the familiar so much that it will pull you back into old emotional states, even if those states once caused you pain. Because pain, you understand, Bakudu, is safer than peace you're still learning to hold. Let me show you how this works. Inside your mind are thousands of tiny loops. Thought loops, emotion loops, reaction loops, all wired through repetition. Every time you lived through fear, your brain built a loop. Every time you felt unworthy, it built another. Every time you acted from survival instead of expansion, another loop formed. Not to punish you, but to protect you in the only way it knows how. Over time, these loops become muscle memory. Not in your body, but in your emotional field. So when your frequency rises, when you step into a higher version of yourself, your nervous system feels something unusual. Discomfort. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because your brain has never seen you operate from this altitude. And when the brain encounters the unfamiliar, it reacts the same way every time. Pull back, retreat, return to baseline. This is why reality drift feels so quiet, so subtle, so believable. Your nervous system whispers, let's go back to the old pattern. That pattern kept us alive. Not happy, not fulfilled, just alive. And for your survival brain, alive is enough. That's why sometimes you wake up feeling heavy even though nothing is wrong. That's why certain moods seem to come out of nowhere. That's why your old identity can still feel more real than the version of you you're trying to become. It's not a spiritual attack. It's not a sign you're failing. It's your brain running its favorite shortcut, the emotional patterns it already knows. Remember, your mind isn't trying to drag you backward. It's trying to bring you back to stability. Its version of stability, which happens to be the old you. And until you teach it otherwise, your nervous system will keep choosing familiarity over expansion. This is the neurological engine behind reality drift. When your awareness goes offline, your brain chooses the identity that requires the least energy to maintain. That identity is almost always the old one. But once you understand this, once you see how your biology unconsciously participates in the drift, you're finally ready for the next layer, the spiritual layer, the part that explains why your soul feels the pull just as strongly as your mind does. That's where we go next. Now let's move past the biology, past the circuitry, past the loops of your nervous system, and step into the part of you that doesn't speak in chemicals or electricity. The part that speaks in presence, in intuition, in resonance, your spiritual field. Here's the truth the mind resists, but the soul has always known. Every frequency you've ever lived still echoes in your energy. You don't shed versions of yourself just because you outgrow them, you carry them, you transcend them, you rise above them. But their imprint remains like old songs stored in a playlist you no longer listen to but can still hum from memory the moment it plays again. In the spiritual world, this phenomenon has many names. Falling out of alignment, losing presence, dropping back into the old self. Different words, same truth. Your soul can feel the slip long before your mind can explain it. And here's the part that matters. The pieces of you that haven't been healed. The wounds, the shadows, the unprocessed grief, the silenced emotions, the identities you had to wear to survive. They don't just disappear. They stay in your field as low-frequency anchors. Not because they're trying to sabotage you, but because they're trying to be witnessed, acknowledged, integrated, held. See, spiritual drift doesn't pull you down because you're unworthy. It pulls you down because certain parts of you are still waiting to be brought into the light. This is why sometimes in the middle of your highest states, when you're aligned, inspired, elevated, you suddenly feel a dip, a heaviness, a quiet, familiar pull. That's not regression, that's resonance. The old frequency inside you recognizes the gap between where you are and where you came from. And it asks for attention, not affection, not attachment, just awareness. Because awareness is healing, presence is integration, and integration is how your frequency stabilizes instead of drifting. Your soul doesn't punish you for slipping. It simply calls you back to yourself again and again until the higher version of you becomes the only version that feels true. This is the spiritual dimension of reality drift. When you lose presence, you don't fall back into darkness. You fall back into unhealed versions of yourself that are still trying to return home. And once you understand that, once you feel the pull not as failure but as invitation, the whole game changes. Now you're ready for the next layer, the twist that reveals what actually triggers the drift in the first place. That's where we go next. So now you understand the drift, the quantum pull, the neurological slide, the spiritual echo. But there's still one question that keeps whispering beneath the surface. If drifting is natural, then what actually starts it? What's the spark? What's the first micro shift that knocks your frequency off center before you even notice you've left yourself? Most people think it's something dramatic, a big emotional collapse, a stressful event, a setback, a failure. But the truth is quieter, much quieter. The drift doesn't begin with intensity, it begins with interruption. A moment where your attention gets captured by something that is not aligned with the version of you you're becoming. And that moment can be so small you'd never suspect it. Let me show you. There are 4 hidden triggers, 4 silent initiators that pull your frequency away from its higher resonance with almost no warning at all. I won't take you deep into them yet. Not yet. Because once you understand these, you'll never look at your energy the same way again. But for now, just listen to their names and feel what they stir inside you. Emotional fatigue. That subtle drain you ignore because you think you can just push through. Unconscious environment absorption. The energy you pick up from rooms, people, chaos, noise, without realizing you've swallowed something that isn't yours. Identity reversion. That old version of you that quietly steps forward when your guard is down. And nervous system overload. The moment your body says this is too much, and pulls you back into the version of you that once kept you safe. These 4 triggers don't announce themselves, they don't crash in, they don't shake your world, they whisper, they slip in. They nudge the dial of your frequency 1 tiny degree off its center. And that's all it takes. Just 1 degree, because 1 degree becomes 2, 2 becomes 5, 5 becomes a mood you can't explain, a heaviness you can't trace. A version of yourself you didn't mean to return to. That's the drift, silent, invisible, triggered by forces you never realized were influencing you. And now that you know their names, now that the curtain has been pulled back just an inch, you're ready for the part that changes everything, the core truth behind why your frequency falls. The moment your attention slips away from your new identity. Here's the moment everything clicks. The moment the entire idea of reality drift stops being a mystery and becomes something you can finally see. Your frequency doesn't fall because your life gets harder. It doesn't fall because you're emotional. It doesn't fall because you're weak, undisciplined, or unfocused. Your frequency falls for one simple, profound reason. Your attention returns to an outdated identity. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. The entire drift comes down to where your awareness lands when you're not consciously choosing who you are becoming. Let me say it plainly. Every time your attention slips back to the version of you you once were, your frequency slips with it, not because that old version is bad, not because it's broken, but because every identity carries its own vibration, its own posture, its own emotional climate, its own perceptual lens. So when your attention falls, your frequency follows. Think about it. When you think like the old you, you feel like the old you. When you feel like the old you, you act like the old you. And when you act like the old you, you broadcast the frequency of a timeline you've already outgrown. This is why drift feels so confusing, so sneaky, so invisible, because your old identity is familiar, comfortable, automatic. It doesn't knock on the door to let you know it's returning. It walks right in the moment you stop noticing your own presence. Your higher self requires awareness. Your old self requires none. That's the trap. You only need to be unconscious for a few seconds for the gravitational pull of who you used to be to reclaim you. Not fully, not dramatically, just enough for your vibration to shift into the frequency of your past. And here's the deeper truth. Your energy always flows to the identity you're inhabiting, not the one you're dreaming of. If your attention is living in old wounds, old fears, old labels, old versions of you, then your frequency has no choice but to fall into alignment with them. Presence is the only thing that keeps your vibration elevated. Not motivation, not discipline, not inspiration. Presence. Your ability to stay aware of who you are choosing to be right now. That's the core insight, the heart of the drift, the truth most people never learn. You don't lose your higher frequency, you just stop inhabiting the identity that created it. But once you see this, once you recognize that your vibration follows your attention, everything opens up, because now you can steer it. Now you can interrupt the drift. Now you can stabilize the frequency not by trying harder, but by returning to yourself in tiny, consistent, powerful moments. And that's exactly where we go next. Into the practical bridge that shows you how to stop the drift in real time. Now that you understand the drift, not just the science, not just the neurology, not just the spiritual mechanics, but the heart of it, the way your identity quietly pulls your frequency back into the past, you're finally ready for the part that actually changes your life. How to stop the drift in real time. And here's the beautiful thing. It's not complicated. It's not dramatic. You don't need a retreat, a ritual, or a mountain. You don't need a perfect morning routine. You don't need hours of meditation. All you need are small, consistent acts of presence that recenter your identity before the drift completes its cycle. Think of them as anchors, not heavy anchors. Light ones, micro anchors. Moments designed to pull you back into the version of yourself you're choosing to become. Let me show you the 4 most powerful ones. 1. Micro-presence resets. 10 seconds, that's all it takes. 10 seconds to come back to your breath. 10 seconds to feel your body. 10 seconds to remember, I'm here. I'm awake. I'm choosing myself right now. You can do this anywhere, in your car, at your desk, in the kitchen, during a conversation. It's a tiny pause, but it interrupts the drift instantly. Because presence is the antidote to unconsciousness. 2. Frequency labeling. This one is simple. Name what's happening. When you feel off, when your mood dips, when your thoughts start sounding like your old self. Say it gently without judgment. I'm drifting. Just that. The moment you name it, you pull the pattern into awareness, and awareness breaks the spell. Because you can't drift unconsciously once you're conscious of the drift. 3. Identity bookmarks. Your identity lives in your body, in your posture, your breath, your tone, your facial expression. So choose one physical cue that belongs to your higher self. A way you stand, a way you breathe, a way you soften your shoulders, a way you hold your eyes. This becomes your bookmark, a physical reminder that pulls you back into the identity you're embodying. A tiny shift in your posture creates a massive shift in your frequency. 4. Quantum interruptions. This one is a favorite. Whenever you feel yourself slipping, thoughts looping, emotions tightening, energy dropping, interrupt it. 3 seconds, that's all. Pause, breathe, shift. You don't need to figure out the emotion. You don't need to fix the thought. You don't need to analyze the trigger. Just interrupt the drift before it completes its momentum. It's like tapping the brakes on a car before it rolls down the hill. Small, quick, powerful. And here's the deeper truth behind these practices. You don't stabilize your frequency by trying harder. You stabilize it by returning to yourself again and again in small, consistent moments. The drift only wins when you stop noticing. Presence only wins when you return. You don't need perfection. You just need repetition. These 4 practices, micro resets, labeling, bookmarks, interruptions, are how you teach your mind, your body, and your energy to recognize the higher identity as home instead of the old one. And once that happens, once the higher version becomes familiar, the drift can no longer pull you back the way it used to. Now the journey shifts. Now you're not just maintaining the frequency, you're preparing to direct it. Which leads us into the next part, the resonance ending that seals everything together and sets the stage for what's coming next. So here's what I want you to remember, not as a concept, not as a lesson, but as something you can feel in your bones. Your frequency isn't fragile. It isn't disappearing. It isn't slipping away from you. It's simply waiting for you to return. You don't need to fight for it. You don't need to prove yourself worthy of it. You don't need to chase the highest version of you like it's running ahead, threatening to leave you behind. No. Your frequency isn't trying to escape you. It's trying to stay with you. It just can't do that when you stop being with yourself. That's all the drift ever was. Not a punishment, not a setback, not a sign that you've lost the path, but a gentle reminder. Stay here. Stay present. Stay inside the identity you're choosing, because the moment you come back to awareness, even for a breath, even for a heartbeat, your frequency rises to meet you like it never left. It doesn't judge you for slipping. It doesn't resent you for forgetting. It doesn't keep score or count the number of times you drifted into older versions of yourself. It just waits. Patiently, quietly, softly, like a light on a distant shore waiting for a ship to turn its head just enough to see the glow again. And when you do, when you remember yourself, even for a second, your entire field responds. Your breath deepens. Your chest softens, your thoughts clear, your energy rises, your identity aligns. Not through effort, but through recognition. This is the beauty of frequency work. This is the compassion baked into the structure of your consciousness. You can always return. You can always rise. You can always step back into the version of you that feels like truth. There is no final fall, only forgetting. And there is no permanent forgetting, only remembering. And every time you remember, every time you choose yourself, you anchor the new frequency a little more. You make it a little more natural, a little more familiar, a little more you. That's how you stop the drift, not by force, but by presence, not by perfection, but by return. And now, with this resonance settled in your system, you're ready for what comes next. Not just stabilizing your frequency, but learning how to guide it, shape it, steer your reality into the timeline you were meant to live. That's where the journey continues. And now that you've learned how to return to your frequency, now that you understand the drift, the pull, the mechanics, and the way your awareness shapes your state, there's a new question rising in front of you. A bigger question, a question that doesn't just keep you aligned, but gives you the power to shape where your reality is heading. Because stabilizing your frequency is only the beginning. It keeps you present. It keeps you anchored. It keeps you awake. But once you're steady, once you're able to hold your identity without slipping, you unlock something much more profound, the ability to guide your reality instead of being guided by it. Imagine this. What if your timeline isn't fixed? What if every version of your future already exists as a vibrational path, waiting for you to tune into it? What if your frequency isn't just a state, but a steering wheel? What if your alignment doesn't just stabilize your life, but redirects it? What if you could choose which version of your future becomes real? Not by hustling harder, not by controlling outcomes, but by aligning with the identity that already lives in that timeline. That's where we're going next. Timeline steering. The art of guiding your reality through the frequency you hold, the identity you inhabit, and the presence you bring into each moment. This is where the journey shifts from staying afloat to navigating the ocean itself, from drifting to directing, from returning to yourself to creating from your highest self, on purpose. If you've ever wondered why some people seem to jump timelines, why certain shifts in life happen so suddenly, why breakthroughs appear out of nowhere, the answer is here. And in the next chapter, you'll learn exactly how to steer your frequency into the timeline that's been waiting for you this entire time. We're just getting started.